Order of the Kerrville Economic Improvement Corporation. And I will lead the invocation this morning, if you'll bow with me. Lord, thank you for Kerrville. Thank you for all that you accomplish through your people here. We thank you for a beautiful, wonderful community, and thank you for the opportunity to be a part of shaping its future. Just pray for your guidance and wisdom as we deliberate today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen.
Do we have anybody signed up to speak today? No? Okay. All right. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the April 17th, 2023 meeting.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor, raise your hand. Thank you. That passes. Now our KEDC report from Mr. Salinas.
Hey, Mr. Chair, members of the board, I'll start with some of our local activity. As far as the KDC, we've been selected by the Texas Economic Development Council as one of 4 cities in the state of Texas, being studied as an example of an EDC that's working on resiliency, recovery, and economic sustainability. That's specifically for our work with the industry, education, and quarterly roundtables. So the site selection firm of Ernst & Young, which is a pretty big firm, one of the big 4, they're going to be working with us on content, videos, a series of podcasts featuring the KDC in Kerrville, and it's going to be promoted nationally through the firm's public relations network. They're going to be in town actually next week, conducting some interviews with our local leadership, industry executives, and business owners. They're also going to be taking some B-roll of the community and what have you, and anything that they find of interest. So this project actually came through the Economic Development Administration from 2 to 3 years ago through COVID and their CARES Act funding as it pertains to EDCs that are again looking at how approaching economic development in a holistically way as far as resiliency. Along those lines, we're also part of an interview with Mayor Judy Eichner. This was with Business View magazine out of California. It's a magazine that has a huge reach. Its readership is high among C-level executives with major corporations in the U.S. So they're going to be featuring Kerrville as far as quality of life, tourism, and economic development. Going into next month, Katie and myself, we're going to be busy on a different high-profile projects, attending some conferences, and then also hosting some prospect visits as well. So basically, since the beginning of the year, we've been like that, and going into the summer, we're going to be just in and out of the office a lot, working a lot of these different projects. We're also going to be working with the International Economic Development Council, partnering with them as providing some expert counsel with some of their projects that they also asked us to be a part of. As far as the budget, we've already started internally on the budget request for fiscal year 2024. So we'll be meeting with all of 4 of our stakeholders, that's the EIC, the city, and the county, and the KPUB. So with the EIC, we'll be reaching out to you all as far as just providing an informal report on some of the projects that we have and some of the programs that we have as well. Mr. Adrian Lopez, which some of you met, I think, last month or 2 months ago. He's the president of the San Antonio Area Workforce Development Organization. They represent a 12-county region. That includes Kerr County. They're going to be bringing in several of their workforce boards from the San Antonio area and Austin areas. So as far away as Cedar Park and Uvalde, they're going to be coming in. This is happening next week. And again, he's saying, look, Kerrville needs help as far as filling jobs. And I'm sure they do too, right? But we really need that help with a lot of our local companies. Our company's going to be in attendance. And again, just helping tap into that, into their respective workforce boards and expand that catchment area for our local industry. At the Capitol, Katie was in Austin last month at the Kerrville legislative reception. And of importance there, we invited some people from the governor's office, so I think 2 of them attended, and one of them is the director of economic development, and he's been instrumental in helping myself work different projects, and that includes the Killdeer project. Very supportive of Kerrville. We're glad that he was there, and the community really took him in and really, started talking about some of the projects that we have right now. And then we also had the opportunity to meet with Representative Murr and provide an update on Project Saddle as well. And about Project Saddle, we continue meeting with them on a weekly basis. They're actually in town tomorrow, the day after. They're back again next week. They're back again in June several times. So through this process, through the economic development process, once you start getting closer to whenever they're making a decision, you're going to be meeting with them more regularly. And at this point, it's almost like, every hour we're communicating with them. So that's a good sign. So a reminder, that's the manufacturer of advanced construction materials. And it's an international company with a global presence. They have a presence in about a dozen countries around the world. Again, the potential for about 60 to maybe even 100 jobs paying above county average wages. They're continuing to analyze the proposed sites that they have right now, their options. And again, we have been leaning on engage the office of the governor in helping us with the attraction of this particular project. So I'll have Katie come up and then we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Gil.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the board. I'd like to share with you a little bit more in terms of our marketing initiatives. Like Gil mentioned, we did have the opportunity to attend the Chamber of Commerce Legislative Days in Austin, and our community was very warm in welcoming our colleague from the Office of the Governor, and it was really great to get him introduced to some folks in our community and hear the interactions and the questions that they were able to ask and he was able to provide. As Gil also mentioned, we are preparing for the Ernst & Young case study that will be happening next week. During our industry roundtable, we're going to be hosting an industry roundtable at the same time so that they're able to actually capture some video and audio footage of us on scene, doing the work that we do, and that will be included as part of their case study. In terms of the BRE initiatives, I had an opportunity to attend an IEDC, which is the International Economic Development Council webinar to learn more about trade zones and how our community and business owners might leverage them for economic benefit. I also attended the Workforce Solutions Alamo Job Fair that was recently held at the YO Hotel and had an opportunity to help promote some employment opportunities for local employers and area employers. We also attended the Alamo Area Council of Governments I-10 Texas Corridor Study. Judge Kelly, who is the judge of our county, is actually the chair of the working group. So we were able to weigh in our opinions on that working group study that their consultants are using to make their next step decisions. I was able to connect with some software partners that we work with. They're called Size Up. They have a really fantastic software tool that we've implemented on our new website that business owners and other community leaders can use for business insights. I'm still learning the tool, and we have a press release that will be coming out soon along with some education for our community partners so that they can better leverage the tool. So I don't have too much to share about it because I'm still learning it. In terms of projects, as Gil mentioned, we continue to support Mount Saddle in their due diligence process, and they're crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's, and we're doing what we can to help get them the information that they need. Childcare has been a big project that we've also been working on, and I'm pleased to report that we were able to facilitate an introduction between the Kroc Center and the Community Foundation. And the Community Foundation has stepped up to award them a grant in the amount of $30,000 to help fill some funding gaps for their summer childcare programming. We do have a press release coming out later this month, as well as some follow-up interviews to talk more about how that's going to be implemented and what the future looks like for that program. We continue to collaborate with Workforce Solutions Alamo and the Texas Workforce Commission on a child care funding tool and how to best navigate these state programs for maximum community benefit. And we hope to have more information for you guys on how that plays out again soon. And as many of you know, last week, Mayor Judy made a proclamation about Child Care Appreciation Day, which happened last Friday. So we had an opportunity to attend that and be part of that event. And that concludes my summary, and we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Katie. All right, we'll now move on to the EIC project status update.
Good afternoon. Hope everybody's doing well. Thank you for all of the work you've done. thus far and will continue to do after today, even though you may not do it on this board after today for a minute. Maybe just for a minute. So the Tranquility Island electrical infrastructure, as y'all know, phase 1 is complete, and there were some issues with the total completion of that project. Last week I did receive an email from KCLC at the end of the week with a request to see if EIC would be amenable to returning kind of their portion that's left over if we don't have any more phase 1 projects, because they had some funding gaps for their big lights that they're buying for their separate project. And so I checked in with Ashley to kind of get an update from her on what their plan is for the remaining portions of phase 1. So she's going to check in with George and just kind of talk about what their plan is. And so we might come back to you guys with a request to remit some of that funding back to them. At this point, we're just waiting on that conversation to happen between those two. Kerrville Airport improvements. So we're 3/4 of the way done with the box hangers. The last door is basically needing to go up for the box hangers. And the majority of the site work has been complete for the row hanger project, the part that you all paid to get done. They're putting some swales down, some forms, and it looks really nice. They're getting close to it, so we should have some completion pictures to show you pretty soon on that. Killdeer Mountain Manufacturing they're moving steady. They're doing really well. They got some good designations from Boeing not too long ago. That was a really big highlight for them. They're still on track. We've got staff going in and completing inspections, so they're still doing plumbing, electrical, HVAC, all those things, and so they're still on track to hit their date for opening. The Louise Hayes Fitness Park is on the same track. Everything seems to be going okay. We're arguing with them a little bit on who's going to do the artwork on there. And so we haven't gotten any conclusion on that yet, but that's the little piece that Ashley's working on with them. The downtown area streetscape. Okay, so this one came back. K-Pub got bids back for this project, and they were bigger than any of us had hoped for. As y'all might recall, you authorized EIC to help fund a project no more than $400,000 with an estimate for $225 for the K-Pub 50-50 match. So EIC said they would match that project 50-50. And then we weren't sure what the streetscape portion would look like, and we kind of said between 130 and 180, put a cap at $400,000 on the project. So between Mike and his team and Stuart and us here at staff, we started to do a bunch of value engineering, and Mike asked that we fund that project at $275 a piece. So still a 50-50 match, and we'd still have $125,000 left over for the streetscapes portion of it. And staff feels that we can accomplish that goal. We'd all have to do a little bit of our own work. Streets team would get out there and do a little bit. K-Pub would do a little bit. But it still fits within the goal of that $400,000 budget that you allocated for that project. And so I know that one's got.
You have an EIC workday?
Huh?
EIC workday?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
yeah.
We get some hard hats and some, Stuart will let you all work out in the street. I'm sure that he would. Yeah?
We can start now.
Yeah.
Nothing like having 7 supervisors on it.
Yeah.
That'll go great.
So, it's within the latitude of that project to we didn't know exactly what that was going to be in terms of what K-Pub's costs were. And so we drove that one down as far as we could, but it looks like the 50-50 portion is going to be about $275. So
Remind me again, what did EIC approve?
$400,000 was
That we were gonna pay?
that EIC was going to pay, and that was a combination of 50-50 matching funds for K-Pub's project, and then the remainder would go towards the beautification along the garage streetscape.
As long as we don't lose the party lights.
So,
Right.
Okay. I can give that information to Mike.
so we think the total cost has gone up, or y'all are gonna trim it back to where the total cost of the project has not gone up?
Well, like I said, we value engineered everything that we could. Mike talked down people on their bids. We talked with staff about ways that we could reduce their construction times, ways that we could help with signaling and cones, and so we're all gonna pitch in a little bit, and that's partly how we've been able to drive that cost back down to within our budget. And
So we were hoping to allocate more on the streetscape portion, maintenance. Is that what you're?
Yeah, 180 is what was gonna go to that, and now that number's 125.
125,
Yeah, so we're not spending as much on that project because
I think-
we're,
yeah, but, and at the same token, I think we all had to sharpen our pencils on both projects, the streetscape project and the K-Pub portion. The problem with it is we didn't know what the bids were gonna come back in, and that's why we asked for that buffer in there to help kind of mitigate that. So,
Remind me again, who's driving this project?
well, it's two projects. So this is a project, right? This is EIC and K-Pub working this one. And then in combination with this, and part of the reason this project came up was because there was a CDBG grant that is funded through the state and partially through TERS. That was kind of the catalyst to begin this. So,
CDBG.
Community Development Block Grant, the city applied for a Community Development Block Grant to work on pedestrian mobility. Essentially, it was gonna be Earl Garrett and Water Street, the upgrades to the lighting systems, to the signals, and to the access walkways around it. And then the second part of that project was Clay and Water Street, adding pedestrian signalization, three-way stop, and so that was the start of that. And then K-Pub,
and TERS is paying the match on that.
TERS is paying the match on that, and TERS is also paying for, TERS was the match, and TERS is also paying for that option A project, the Clay and Water Street portion. So the city's driving the projects, but K-Pub came in knowing that we were doing the CDB project and said, hey, this is something that would be in concert with this, and would you all be willing to share the cost of doing that? So we are driving it, but we're driving it through two projects, which is confusing.
Right?
Well, yeah.
There's the one
three.
that's just the city streetscape all by itself.
Yeah, and then there's the CDBG project, and there's the EIC project, yeah, so they're all happening at the same location. So it's been interesting trying to explain this out, because that is a good question, who is driving the ship on this?
Even after hearing it 3 or 4 times, it still gets confusing to me, because I can't understand how it got started in the first place.
Started through the city, through the CDBG grant, that's where it started, that's the origination of it.
And y'all did a traffic study saying that we needed a 3-way stop sign there.
Part of the Clay and Water Street.
Yes, so the traffic studies, we looked at the traffic study and for that piece of it, and there again, there's a whole bunch of different components, different projects that were kind of overlapping here.
Part of the hills.
Excuse me?
Part of the hills being
Part of the hills,
driving
yeah.
more traffic.
Yeah, Heart of the Hills, they were all combined into 2 or 3 different projects that we looked at. And we said, hey, does this really need a stop sign? Does it justify a stop sign? And they said, well, it's kind of borderline, depends on how the development turns out. What are y'all gonna do across the street? How much traffic's flowing through this intersection and so on. So, with the HHHC project and the Clay Street project and the lighting all changing, we're looking at changing that intersection.
So one of the other issues with it is a safety issue. So right now, people park in the middle of that parking garage and they just walk directly across the street, straight to the businesses there. And we want to drive that traffic out to those intersections, and we do see a significantly more people are starting to use that Clay and Water intersection. You saw that, you could see that traffic during the farmer's market, but when HHHC opens up and now you have museum traffic that's gonna be going towards there, you've got additional restaurants that have opened now in that area, so there was a safety issue component to it, and that's kind of what drove us to say this is a good plan, to have that 3-way stop there. I know that may not be a universally held thought, and there's certainly gonna be
It's
some
not.
traffic implications, but that's where we're going with it.
So as part of y'all's process to trim, are we giving up anything in the scope of work on the downtown streetscapes portion of the project?
No, Megan and Kyle in the engineering department have been kind of carving it up several different ways to still meet the aesthetic of what we were looking at, but maybe trim out one piece here, one piece there. So I don't think it would change the scope of what the streetscape will look like. Maybe it has one planer box less. Maybe it has more xeriscaping than it does this, but it's still in line with Kerrville 2050 and the way that we want to have those street sections look like. I think we're all just sharpening our pencils as much as we can to get there.
So at this point, there's no increased ask.
There's no increased ask and there's no action necessary because the way that the agreement's set up is it's a 50-50 cost share with KPUB. Now KPUB is going to meet tomorrow to discuss the same thing because they're going to, Mike's going to be asking their board to figure out this difference here because I think they have $25,000 more they have to add. So we'll see what they say tomorrow, but I'll bring you more to that if there's any change in that project. Then let's see what we got here. Downtown River Trail extension. We should be at 90% construction documents this week. That was what Mr. Hewitt said he was going to be dropping off to engineering.
What does that mean?
We're really close to the finish line, so we've got pretty hard costs. Once he gets to 90% construction documents, we've got the last 10%'s a lot, but we have a real refined number.
Is that the full loop?
No, this is just the downtown portion,
Oh,
the downtown
quarter-
portion, yeah,
quarter
sorry.
mile, okay.
Yeah, from Bud Holdsworth Library and the
that's
ramp
fast.
down to the
Right.
overlook. That's that section right there. And so the same engineering firm is doing the river study that's going around the lake as well. So we have a meeting set up with Mr. Hewitt and his team to kind of discuss where he thinks we're at on that project. So that one's kind of still on an ongoing basis. And with that, I will turn it back over. Any more questions?
Any update on the Peterson Medical Center?
Oh, did I skip over that one? I did. So Peterson, they're blowing and going. They've got construction going on in the surgery center. They have construction going on and should be complete this summer on the parking lot expansion. So they're doing good.
On the downtown River Trail extension, is that coming in about what we thought on cost?
Don't know yet. So we are going to sit down and meet. Yeah, it's not going to go over our budget, that's for sure. We're hoping that we can drive it down. There are a couple of challenging topographic areas in that downtown section. But, anybody who's walked that area knows there's already a path kind of in place out there, so it's not going to deviate too much from that, but we'll bring you back some updated numbers once we get that from Mr. Hewitt.
We're good on easements?
We are still working on a few of those, is my understanding. So we had them years ago, they reverted back. There were some short time windows, so we need to go out and reach out. I think there's 2 or 3 business owners that we still need to finalize all the details with. We're on our way.
Thank you.
That's all I got.
All right, we'll move on to monthly financial report.
Hello, good afternoon, board members. How are y'all?
Good, thank you.
Okay, before we look at the April financials, we're just gonna do a little bit of glimpse at our economy and inflation and talk about things we see every day. So we just thought to give you some food for thought, kind of information to look at. We did a snapshot like this in January, so just kind of an update to that. Our annual inflation rate in the U.S. remains steady at 5% in April, the same as in March it was. This does halt 9 consecutive months of decline, and of course that's because prices are higher and our core goods cost more. So we're looking to see that growth, that increase slow down coming up soon here. And according to the analysts, they track global events and things of that nature. They think inflation will be going down again some more by mid-July, around 4.5 to 4.4% So ending it this quarter in the middle of the summer. So hopefully that makes a good positive change for America. On to our federal interest rates. So as you know, the Reserve, they do adjust their target rate in response to what's happening in the economy. Plenty of other data factors that make their monetary decisions. So consumer spending, industrial production, GDP, different things like that all come into play, as well as our global pandemic and all the financial crisis we're in. So they have reduced increased the federal funds rate by more than 5% this past year, and that is helping to solve the problems of the world. We need some stability in our economy, so they're trying to improve our employment and stabilize the prices so that we can get back on track and not spark a recession here. So it looks like things are going how they're supposed to go, and it's playing out accordingly. That goes into play with your sales tax. So this is just looking at the performance of the sales tax during these inflationary pressures. So just to reiterate, we do receive sales tax 2 months after the sales actually take place. And we have seen some flattening over the last few months here. So the last 2 fiscal years were double-digit increases, and they're down to just a digit now. So April came in with a 16% increase, and that's over fiscal year 22 April. But that did have a $63,000 future period payment in that. But if you take that out, even so, it's going to be a 9% increase over last April. We did get our May collections, and it came in at 3% more over last year. So looking at this fiscal year, our rolling average is 7.8% increase. And we did budget for 6% this year over last year. So as you can see, the gap is closing, and it's going to be super close. But we are very hopeful that we can meet the $5.2 million budget that we set this year. Just watching and monitoring that very closely every month. All right. Can't work this
Can I ask you a
thing.
question?
Yes, sir.
I should have asked this 4 years ago. What area, geographic area, do we get sales tax from? It's not just limited to the city of Kerrville, other city limits. What area in the county, how far out do we go in the county before Ingram gets it versus us, or how does that work?
It's local here. Do we get some ETJ? Nope. All just city limits.
And so, a business outside the city limits, they're not charged the 2.5%, is that correct? Okay.
1.5, yeah. They do pay county.
Yeah, I think, okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir. All right, so on to your actual financials for April. And we just touched on the sales tax, but I'll go through it real quick. So on your current period column, your April sales tax was $364,000, and that was March sales. And again, that's a 16% increase over April of 22. So fiscal year 23 sales tax to date is $2,906,000. And based on budget, we estimated you to be about $2,838,000. So you're better than budget by $67,000. That's pretty tight. Next revenue down is your interest income, $26,301 for the month, and that is $19,000 in your pool and $6,300 in your short-term investments. And so year to date, that gives you $157,000, and I'm happy to say that is the largest year yet on interest income, obviously, because of rates and then some of the work we've been doing on that. Okay, so moving down to expenditures, you had your City of Kerrville Administrative Services, your quarterly payment to KEDC, and monthly debt transfer, and then $125,000 contribution to the Downtown River Trail project. So total expenses for the month, $312,510, gives you a change in net position of $78,000 for the month of April. All right, your cash flow. So first column, ending cash balance, $5,325,000, and then you have the remaining fiscal year projections over to the right. We're just looking to push out some of this funding for these projects. They're moving. We just haven't had to pay anything out very much. And then we're finalizing your fiscal year 24 budget, and I believe we have a workshop set for June that will be going through all those details. Okay, and then your last slide, here's your financial analysis. So top chart is your sales tax comparisons. Your cash and investments are to the right there. Your tax pooled average yield for the month was 4.99%, and then your short-term investments are averaging 5.28%. And then just your bottom chart of your committed project balances. Okay. Any questions on anything?
And I hear what you're saying from the sales tax revenue. Been on the board a long time. Never seen that many negatives in a year on the monthly breakdown. I mean, not much we can do about that, but
For the budget versus actual?
yeah.
Yeah. Just,
No, it's just got a little bit of a red flag kind
yeah,
of
it just slipped
raising
on
it.
us.
When we do our budgeting next year, I think we need to be even more conservative possibly.
Yes, sir. I think we are looking at that.
I figured you were.
All right, anything else?
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, our next item on the agenda is to set the annual Economic Improvement Corporation meeting for June 2023. Do we need action on that? What's the date?
Well, that's the purview of the board, so it can be, let's see.
Has to be after June first. It's automatically June first, unless the consent of the corporation is some other date. So that's what we're asking you to do.
What's the anticipation on the length of that meeting?
Probably another half hour, an hour longer than this
Could we
one, talk through
Could
budget.
could we do it prior to our June meeting?
Your regular meeting is set for June 19th, so.
Come in
I
at
think
3
you-
instead of
I
4?
think historically, my understanding is that you always kind of done that on the same day as the regular meeting in June. So, purview of the board.
Well, so two of us at least won't be here for that meeting, so the rest of you, are y'all okay with the idea of doing the same day, coming in an hour earlier?
Yep.
To do that, so.
I'd like to do it. I mean, that's the easiest way for me to do it.
So can I get a motion to set the annual meeting for June 17th? 19th at 3 o'clock.
So moved.
So we got a move, got a second. All those in favor, raise your hand. That carries. Okay, and then our next item is the application for funding for the Travis Street Pump Station project and scheduling of a public hearing.
So as we've been talking about areas for expansion and projects and the school expansion, a lot of that is driven out to the east of town on Loop 534. And one of the issues that we always come up with in development conversations naturally is, well, what are your capacities? What is your ability to serve? And usually we'll push a lot of that out on the developing community and say, you know, you've got to upsize this pipe, you've got to do a new pipe run down this section of road. And it gets a little more interesting for us when we start saying, okay, you've got to make upgrades to our plants. And those are a little bit more, they're not as black and white. Here's this hard answer of you have to have, you know, you have an 8-inch pipe and you have a 12-inch pipe, and that's kind of a here's a distance run. But a lot of times we'll talk to folks and say, well, you need 127 more, you know, living unit equivalencies to be added, and they don't make 127,000 or 127 unit pumps. They make them in 200s and 250s and 400s and 600s. And so, in an effort to kind of mitigate a lot of that, we wanted to talk to you all about an area in the College Cove pressure plane that is served by the Travis Street pump station. It currently has 250 gallon per minute pumps going to it, and that's going to be insufficient for any of the developments that we've been talking to. Even a 300 unit development is probably going to have some challenges in there to meet that specification. And so it really stalls a lot of the discussions. And we wanted to front load that because, you know, I think we see with the development of both the schools and that area out there is kind of one of the untapped resources as a spot where we get a lot of calls for development. One of the apartment developers that's already built one unit here and is currently under construction with another one on the other side of town, is looking at an area that's out there. We have some housing conversations going on. Lennar's building out there. We're hoping to see if they can continue to build out there. So this is an effort to just kind of front load that conversation and get this portion done. It's a leverage tool that we can use in our discussions with the builders. And it does a lot of good for the regional infrastructure for the city. So you'll see in the packet, in the second page, is the estimated cost of the project from Freese and Nichols. It's $557,000. My hope in discussions with Public Works is that number stays there. There's a contingency in there that's, fairly robust. But even at that, we were hoping to come to the board and ask for a number not to exceed $750,000, because I just don't know if reading the tea leaves at 557 is sufficient moving forward. So with that, I will turn it over, and I got Stuart here, who knows all, and he can answer the questions I can't get to.
Michael, I guess my question would be just precedent about, from a policy standpoint, when it comes to not infrastructure extension, but fill-in capacity, how will that, from a policy standpoint, be handled in terms of pass-through? Is there something unique about this particular upgrade project that doesn't lend itself to pass-through? We're in another situation if you had a developer want to do something that you otherwise would. If the city through EIC pays for this, does that set a precedent that then becomes unfair to another developer across town who wants to do a project that the city's going to ask that developer to pay for? I mean, how does this work from a policy and precedent point of view?
So it's a good question. I think that there's a number of factors in this. Again, kind of you have the hard costs of here's this pipe, here's this off-site infrastructure that we're going to require that you build out, and they can touch it, they can feel it, they can do that work. And it is kind of it is an interesting process where you come in and this is what's available, and kind of the first to the table gets that capacity. And it is a challenge, and so we've looked at a number of different ways to try to address this, one of which is discussions about impact fees. And one of the challenges with impact fees is trying to forecast what all that future development looks like. Now, it is a uniform way to treat development. You say, well, here's an impact fee, it's $2,500 per living unit, and multiply that across all the rest of it, and here you go. The challenge with that is then we have to have enough foresight to be able to future forecast what that infrastructure impact will be. And if the last few years has told us anything, it's been really hard to try and figure that out. And at the same token, it's hard for the developers to try and figure that out. So I don't know that this would set a precedent. I don't think that it would. I think this is a project that, from a staff standpoint, we say this is a good recommendation from staff to the city. Do you guys think this is a good idea for us to move forward with? And council recommended, moving forward with that. I still think that's a project for project basis. If you're on the west side of town and you have a development coming through, what are the impacts of the infrastructure going to be? What are the requirements that they're going to? I think that's still a case-by-case basis. But I would say that the city does try to be strategically future thinking in some areas to plan for that future growth, right? So Holdsworth Drive is a good example, right? That's a project that came through and didn't have any project in mind necessarily, but it was built through a lot of foresight. So I think this is one of those. Stuart he's got a few $1 million worth of projects he wants us to get working on, and several of which the city is going to do through our bonding right now. So this isn't the only infrastructure project that's going to happen. This is just one of many. A lot of those are for future expansion. more development, more infill development. This is just one that we knew was, I think, a good project to come ask you all about.
To me, it seems like a catalyst area.
It is a catalyst area.
And it's poised for development that's already done some form of due diligence for housing, especially for housing. And I think that's how this became an issue, right? Through the development community doing their own due diligence, finding out what the capacity was and what would be needed for that corridor as a whole. Is that right?
Yes, so we've been talking to folks and there's a need for additional capacity in this area. And this will meet not only developments that we feel are gonna come to the table now, but developments that will come in after this as well. Like this is the full future build out for this College Cove area. That's our hope, or our expectation.
So is there a mechanism, going back to your example about the, so many feet of pipe and upsizing, I mean, that's easy to do the math on that. But if your current capacity is X and you want to add new capacity of 4X, is there a way to have those that tap into this new capacity to shoulder some of that cost as they tap into it? I mean, that to me would be this similar logic to saying, hey, you got to upsize the line. This is upsizing the pump.
Yeah.
But you're still going to have a limit. I don't know what the current pump is now. You say it's 250?
250,
And that y'all are looking to upgrade to,
600.
and what is, the 250 supports how many housing units and 600 supports how many?
Let me see if I can answer in a little bit more general terms and not be as precise as 200 versus 600, but. So, as the developers come along, I think I'll make a good observation there of, are we doing something that we wouldn't do other places in town? So let me back up a little bit prior to your question. Say, no, we're really not. We've done this in Kerrville South. When we build lift stations or we build any kind of improvement, we actually oversize them. And then the developers get to come in and say, hey, this area is now available to us to build on. This would be another one of those scenarios. And when to come back in and to come back right down to the numbers and say the developer is, in your scenario of 250 versus 600, somebody's gonna want 150 gallons per minute of that capacity. And we look at that and say, okay, well, the city wants you to oversize the line. And so we get to say, well, there's some extra capacity that we've put into our system that we're allowing you to have. In exchange for that, y'all oversize your line and it's a wash for the utility as a whole. Does that answer both of them?
I'm not,
So the
not
precedent, I was just talking to you about it. So the Legion lift station is another one that y'all helped fund that was, kind of already been done. But one of the things that I apologize, didn't get this across is this expedites the housing conversation. And this is one of those ones that we desperately need to get done. So this advances that, because we're not gonna have to kind of argue and negotiate with the developers about that. This one will be in place and ready to go. This helps speed up that process.
You mentioned the city's doing some bonds for some other infrastructure upgrades. I mean, ultimately, whether it's water or sewer, the city is gonna get recapture through service fees for those utility customers that are added because of the added. And I don't know what the repayment on investment is through utility revenue. But
We try to run.
why would this not be something that could be included as part of a bond issuance?
I can probably speak to that a little bit. So whenever we're talking about recapturing through revenue, so revenue is essentially, when you look at rate setting and those kind of things, it's really operational. So there's not a whole lot of gap left over by the time we pay operations. So that's one of the reasons we went and issued these revenue bonds here recently, is because in order to maintain some semblance of rate for the citizen that are already there and they're not paying for, future development, those kind of things, there's just not a lot of savings account, I guess, left over, revenue over expenses at the end of the the year. So that's the reason we went and issued the bond. So the repayment of that, you know, you would have to build it into the rate, essentially. So
Yeah,
if that
and
was direction of council, then of course
Right,
that's what we do,
right.
but.
So the years I've been on council, it's been, we don't wanna lose money on this, but we don't wanna overtax the ratepayer to have a surplus of funds.
To, you know, pay for new development and those
Yeah,
kind
for
of things,
capital
which is,
projects
comes
and
back
things
to the
like that.
conversation about, you know, other fees, tap fees,
Yeah,
impact
it
fees,
should
those kind
cover
of things.
operations and.
Plus some,
status
but not.
quo, Yeah.
Does that help some?
I'm gonna say up front, I'll end up supporting this, but I have some real uncomfortableness about it. At the last meeting, we raised the question, well, if we didn't fund this, what would happen? And basically, we were told that that would just stop the development out there. So to me, that puts us under a little bit of, kind of over the barrel. You know, if you don't approve this, you're the bad guys, and you stop growth in this catalyst area. I don't think that's a good position to put this board in. I think this city council, the city staff, and I've said this before, and I know y'all talk about it, and I know y'all are smart, but we've got to come up with a way to where we can participate in these projects. But just to come back and say, hey, we're in a bind, EIC, take care of this for us. I don't like that. And I think the city has to find, and I don't know if it's impact fees, I don't know if it's changing the water rate structure, I don't know the mechanism to do that. But in a long-term scenario, we can't just come back to this, hey, grandma, I need a new car, scenario. My car broke, even though I knew it was gonna break.
I certainly didn't mean for any of that to come across that way. Historically, when I've looked at the spending for the last 25 years of EIC, half of that funding has been infrastructure projects and half of that funding has been quality of life. So.
That's not true, I don't think, because there's economic development built into that also. It should be about a third and a third and a third.
Well, so it's, so if you take away the athletic complex, it's about 50-50 between quality of life and infrastructure. But I think I understand what you're saying. And then the council has asked that EIC consider this as an infrastructure project that will help with economic development. That's the purpose for them asking. So I think I understand what you're saying, but I don't think it was meant as anything other than these are projects that Stewart needs to get done over here for the bond that are TCEQ related projects. These are projects where we have upgrades that we need to get done to make sure that we continue to maintain a healthy system and we can go forward with those. And this was a project that was not necessarily on that critical infrastructure list that needed to get done that way. This was one that was more so geared towards where's the expansion going in town. So it looks to be going this way.
The easy way to answer that for me to ask that question, if we did not have an EIC, this project would not go forward.
It would go through the natural progression of when the developments came, then that project would probably get done. It would also get done in a piecemeal way because we would make them do this in the minimum requirements. So I need 127 units. Okay, there's 150 GPM pump, and so it's the mobilization costs associated with it. So yes, not that it wouldn't get done. It would just, you know, we have $120 million worth of utility projects, and those are constantly being evaluated for. Here's the ranking priority. Yeah.
I can get behind the logic of, you know, EIC front-loading this to spur and incentivize development. What I'm still not clear on is if we're gonna add, I'm just making up some completely hypothetical numbers, if we're gonna add, you know, 3,000 doors of capacity by buying this new pump, is there any way to recoup from the developers that come in to say, okay, because you're gonna utilize some of that capacity, you're gonna have to pay for it, or pay some of it? Is there any mechanism to be able to accomplish that? Because again, it gives EIC more opportunity to go spend that money elsewhere if we can recoup it somewhere down the road. And I think all developers are gonna look at projects and anticipate there's gonna have to be some public infrastructure improvement to make their development work. Not all the time, but it comes up a lot.
Yeah.
I don't think we can get it back through EIC, can we?
No,
That's
I
kind
mean,
of-
he's, I mean, it's not a repayment, right? So it's a, it would be, that doesn't exist in its form. So the impact fee is one of the ways we could do it. Now, there is there is the mechanism for us to claw that back if we had a, sort of, here's your pro rata share. Now, you do that on undeveloped land with water pipe. See that mostly, right? So you've got developed piece of property, at the end of that property is where the lines stop. You got a vacant piece of land, and then you've got the next place that's developing. So you're gonna run that all the way across to your business A. Well, that business A doesn't wanna pay for that person's share, so they would set up a pro rata share for that. And we can put those mechanisms in place for this. It's a little different than doing it for a line. You see that in cities a lot where it's like, here's the line pro rata share, it was 1,000 feet. You can do a per linear foot, here's what it is, right? For us to get down to here's what the living equivalent unit is, and that's gonna be X portion of this, and that's your share. That's a conversation that we haven't had yet with council, or haven't finalized that.
Even
with city
then,
council.
the city would get that money, the EIC wouldn't.
Well, one of the other mechanisms we talked about as well is a reservation of capacity. So right now, that happens through plating processes and other things. Again, purpose of EIC is to accelerate the community's vision, right? Housing is one of your goals.
I got all that.
But for this funding, that vision will happen slower. It'll happen via the market and be market driven. And so it won't happen in the time span that you want it to happen because this is a significant barrier and a hurdle that has been identified. One of the mechanisms, we heard you loud and clear at previous conversations about, hey, what guarantees do we have, or what repack options, or what accelerator options do we have? One of the things that we have contemplated, if it's a desire of EIC, is maybe it's not necessarily repayment, but maybe it's performance of completing that vision for the community within a certain time span. And so you may have a developer that's willing to have a reservation of capacity so long as it's got a fuse lit with it. So you've got to come through and perform on the completion of that housing or whatever it may be that they're looking at doing.
Well, not to me, that solves really the core of the issues. If we can spend this money and it guarantees we're gonna get houses, then okay.
I like that idea.
My concern still is if EIC becomes the funding source of choice for expansion of infrastructure capacity within developed areas of the city, then we're gonna hear this again and again with others that are coming up with, if the only scenario that we can pass along cost to a developer is when we're extending lines out. It just seems to me that you can go to a developer and say, well, we don't have the capacity, so you're gonna have to pay to upgrade the capacity. And they're gonna say, well, EIC did this pump over here last year, and our project's better for the community in whatever way that would be described. I think we're gonna become that funding source of choice for future projects. I do think there's a precedent issue. I'm not sure that that's a place that, I'm kind of like, I think maybe the rest of them, I want to see this area develop. I like what is being contemplated in this area, particularly affordable housing. I just am more concerned about the precedent and starting to get a couple of these a year, and that starts to start small projects could add up and become a significant part of our budget going forward.
When you say precedent, are you thinking legal precedent or practical
No,
precedent?
practical precedent, for sure.
So, I understand that. I do. I think I've been here for just over a year now, and I went to the Economic Summit, and I heard the same housing conversation 2 years in a row. Spoke on the second one, had the same exact conversation. I think right now we're in what I can see is the most challenging housing market that I've seen for us. And so I think it would set the precedent that we did help out in this area for these projects. I think that we have a housing crisis to kind of work through. And I think that this would help alleviate that. And I think that, to me, that's a one-off, and I can help have that conversation with every single developer from now until the end of time. I'm not having anybody come up here and just ask you all for a handout. We argue, fight, get a little heated every now and again with the developers when they're asking for things that are way outside of their purview. We like to do that behind closed doors as much as we can. But this is where we see it.
Yeah, you know, to me, this is an area that we're not looking at doing this for one developer. This is an area where we have 3 developments of interest plus commercial to come on site, potentially after that. For me, y'all can tell me differently, and I'd like you to tell me, but I don't know that there is another area poised for this kind of growth that's at this level of engineering and development, and that would be within the next year or 2 years even, as this catalyst area that seems like it's ready to pop right now, but it can't because it doesn't have the pressure plane and it doesn't have the ability to get the water that it needs. But you tell me, what other areas do y'all see that EIC might be asked to deal with or contemplate in the near future? And I know it's a crystal ball, but I just can't,
Sure.
I can't wrap my head around a particular area that really is like the one that you're talking about right now.
Well, so I think it's kind of twofold. One, we're trying to solve, part of the discussion out here in this area is that we're trying to solve keeping those prices to an affordable level. And other areas of town where they're going to develop, they may develop houses that are, we don't necessarily, or we're not necessarily asking them to consider those options, right? So build to your market, build to whatever you want to do. But as parts of those discussions where we're saying, okay, can we, bring a product to market that is attainable to these folks? I think that's a lot of that area right there that we're trying to catalyze. So I don't know the future. I don't know what the tea leaves are, but yes, I think this is an area that's probably going to accomplish a lot of that goal.
Well, to me, it would be a shame to create this additional capacity and see, some future developer come in there and bring something that, maybe is a big footprint, but doesn't add significant economic impact to the city and doesn't add housing. So I think if we can tie it back to, reserving it and trying to incentivize housing, that, to me, that is the issue that we need to be solving, is figuring out how to get more houses that people can afford to buy.
Well, that's part of what the ask is for you today. So we've been talking to these folks, and this is one of the barriers. We thought, let's try to overcome this barrier. It's not the only barrier. This is, when we're talking about infrastructure costs for, 500 unit housing development, there's going to be $10 million worth of infrastructure costs in there. And so this is one of the hurdles to overcome, not the only one.
Any more comments? What do you need from us?
So the request for today was if y'all were amenable to it, to set a public hearing for the next month.
What is the board's desire in terms of, do you feel like you have all the information you want to set this for a public hearing? Do you want to request staff to come back with anything additional?
I don't.
Can we, if we set it for a public hearing, can you guys dig into and give us some insight on how that, would you call it an allocation or reserve, how that would work to accomplish the goal of trying to make this, tie this, this money to future housing development?
we can do that.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to set this for public hearing on June the 19th.
Yes, sir.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our next item on the agenda is to adjourn into executive session to discuss two matters. Before we do that, before everybody clears the room, just want to say, this is Danny and I's last meeting, maybe Kim's, maybe not.
Maybe.
Hopefully she'll get reappointed, but I just want to say, 4 years being on this board, I've really enjoyed working with every one of you. Y'all are an incredible team. I've worked with you guys both in this environment and on projects that I do professionally, and y'all are awesome. So thank you very much for the honor of getting to serve on this board, and I hope I get a chance to do something else with you guys in the future, so. All right, Danny, you want to say
Yeah,
that?
yeah, I'd just like to second that. I've, had a great time being on this board. I've been on some other city boards for 6 years prior to this. And I think the most impressive thing that I've learned in that 10 years is what the quality of the staff we have in the city. It's amazing to me how good you people are and how dedicated you are to the city. It's been a real pleasure to serve, answering all my stupid questions. I've appreciated it. I've enjoyed every second of it. And Mike, enjoyed all your help during that time. And you guys are just terrific. I think we've got a great city here. If we can just keep it going the way it's going, I think it's gonna be something else.
All right, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn into executive session under sections 551, 071, 72, and 87.
So moved.
Get a second?
Second.
Second? All right, we will adjourn into executive session at 5:02. Thanks, everyone.
And we're on.
Okay, it's 5:19, we're out of executive session, and no action items to take. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? All right, we are adjourned.
Hey, wait.
I have a question.